All right. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning from where you are joining. YPFP Tokyo is proud to host our third part of Quad event series in collaboration with Global Policy, Diplomacy and Sustainability Program. It is first event in the regional security focus series on Quad. My name is Jay Makhijani and I am a programs officer at YPFP Tokyo. Before we get started, we would like to share a few administrative comments and guidelines of the program. So first thing, let me take the opportunity to share a few remarks about YPFP Tokyo as an organization. YPFP Tokyo is a global organization that has been working nearly 20 years to build the next generation of diverse and passionate leaders through career building, programs, engagement, events, research, and publications. Tokyo is the newest YPFP branch and the first in Asia. We kind of provide nexus of engagement for scholars, students, professional, and thoughtful leaders across sectors. YPFP Tokyo also connects with people from all around the world and those in the interest in the Asia. We are membership-based organization. We accept new members applications on the rolling basis. We encourage you to visit our website to learn more about YPFP Tokyo. Also, please note that this event will be recorded and will be posted after the event on our social media handles and our YouTube channel. So if you do want to visit, please check our YouTube channel. All right. Thank you so much for your kind attention. Now, I would like to introduce and welcome our keynote speakers from Global Policy Insight. So the first speaker for our event is Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, who is a career diplomat, retired as Indian High Commissioner to Canada in 2016, after 35 years in his career. Mr. Ambassador has been posted to South Korea for his official spokesperson in the Ministry of External Affairs and at the Council General to Shanghai. He held various positions in Indian mission in Tokyo, New York, Moscow, Islamabad, and Cairo. Presently, he is a foreign affairs specialist, speaker, columnist, and advisor. He focuses on the Indo-Pacific region, including Northeast Asia, China, Japan, and Korea. Also to note, he has been speaker at various programs, events, training institutes, and also sits on the governing and advisory board of some of them. He was recognized as an outstanding diplomat by Prestige Institute of Management and Research, Indore, in January 2020. He writes for a number of Indian and overseas publications and is associated with a lot of think tanks, publications, and he's been contributing through many papers and articles. He regularly appears as an expert and panelist on India and international TV channels. Now, I would again like to introduce and welcome one of our next speaker, which is Arpit Chaturvedi, who is a public policy and international relation professional. He is CEO and co-founder of Global Policy Insight, which is a centrist think tank. He is also co-founder of Envipol, which is an environmental consultancy firm based out of New Delhi. He is founder of Insight International and also a joint director of Global Policy, Diplomacy and Sustainability Fellowship. He serves as an co-chair for various international affairs forums such as Quad Security Forum. He also serves as an advisor at Kyiv School of Diplomatic Arts. He holds an MBA and MPA and has taught at various prestigious institutes across the world such as San Francisco State University. Arpit has advised policymakers, NGOs, and businesses and combined history, system thinkings, and macroeconomics. Also to mention, he has been producing a lot of high quality of research material for policymakers across the globe. So I would like to again welcome to our speakers, and Mr. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Jay. Konnichiwa. Good evening. Namaste. Friends, it is a pleasure to participate in this important event called the Regional Security Perspectives, the Quad in Asia India Seminar, organized by YPFP Tokyo in collaborations with GPOD. I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me. Having had the opportunity of serving in Tokyo in the late 90s and also having had the honor of interacting with former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, I cannot but begin my address by paying my most respectful homage to a great statesman and visionary of our times. In his recent book, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo described Shinzo Abe as a global leader of extraordinary courage and vision. I have always believed that Prime Minister Abe had the foresight of visualizing what his peers could not. And one of the things which he did in his address to the Indian Parliament in 2007, which has now come to known as Quad, has been a game changer. In his untimely demise, the Quad has lost a true champion and India a true friend. Speaking recently at an event in India, Dr. S. Jaishankar, the External Affairs Minister of India, described Quad as one of the greatest foreign policy achievements of the 20th century. Formation of Quad has been one of the most significant geopolitical developments in recent years. The speed at which it is striking roots is both heartening and unprecedented. Conceptualized in 2007 and nearly buried in 2008, the grouping not only resurfaced in 2017, but has taken big strides since September 2019, when the first ever foreign ministers meeting was held in New York, giving the Quadrilateral Forum or Quad the much needed impetus. Under President Biden's watch, 4 Quad summits have been held, 2 in person and 2 virtual. The American preoccupation with the Ukraine conflict has deflected some attention from the Quad, but this hopefully is a passing phase. Quad has become one of the most talked about and analyzed multilateral initiatives in the world, with far-reaching implications: strategic, political, security, and economic. Not many had foreseen that the grouping would gain traction the way it has, given the sheer diversity of the 4 member states in terms of size, geographical location, history, geopolitical outlook, level of development. Even so, the grouping is gaining strength and depth with each change of government in all the Quad countries, which reflects an overwhelming consensus across the political spectrums among the political leadership, strategic community, and the bureaucracy. A degree of tentativeness about the forum in the initial years is already a thing of the past. That said, it is useful to reflect over what has brought these countries together and is keeping them so. In simple words, it is a commonality of interests and challenges. Yet it is not incidental that all 4 member nations are vibrant democracies, having an abiding faith in the rule of law and in peaceful settlement of differences, and a belief in co-prosperity and stability. These I describe as the pull factors, but then there is also a major push factor, namely the concerns about the rise of an expansionist, revanchist, revisionist China, which has habitually engaged in aggression, manipulation, and intimidation in pursuit of its foreign policy objectives. I'm afraid China is just not capable of working with other countries as an equal or having putting in effort to develop a consensus on issues which are of common interest. It is also important to flag here that the US, Japan, and Australia have a defense alliance. India traditionally has been non-aligned and has opted for partnerships over alliances given our history and given our experience. But when compelled by circumstances, we have taken some bold decisions, including the conclusion of a treaty of peace, friendship, and cooperation with the Soviet Union in August 1971, notwithstanding our preference for non-alignment. Today, I'm happy to say that the relation between India and the US is much bigger than a partnership. Some have even called it a quasi-alliance. In any event, we are clear that our future lies with, and we accord priority to our ties with the US, Japan, and Australia. In his opening remarks at the Quad summit in Tokyo last year, Prime Minister Modi termed Quad as a force for good. Most nations see it in the similar refrain, but not China and not Russia to a large extent. Beijing had once dismissed Quad as a sea foam, and that indeed is what it seemed to be when it was effectively put to rest in 2008. Beijing now views it as a clique or even an Asian NATO. It believes that Quad is meant to contain it. All the same, China continues to flex its muscles all around. The latest misadventure came in the shape of spy or surveillance balloons, which China floated over North and South America and has floated over other countries also, designed to collect information on the military capabilities of nations around the world. But China, being China, has the gumption of insisting that these were balloons made for collecting weather information, which just strayed off course a few thousand miles. They did not say that. This is what I am saying. Information has since become public that at least 3 such spy balloons were spotted over the Japanese territory since 2019. The Japanese government is naturally considering additional measures to protect its airspace and sovereignty by empowering the Japanese self-defense force suitably. We also welcome increased outlays in Japanese defense budget, strengthening of our military posture and deterrence capabilities, as well as willingness to provide military hardware to ASEAN and other nations facing external security challenges from same or similar quarters. Truth be told, Beijing wants to control the entire Indian Ocean region from East Africa to Honolulu. There is little doubt that President Xi Jinping wants to create a hierarchical China-centric world order where it is the sole hegemon and other countries occupying around have a subordinate position. Such an arrangement would be based, as someone said, not on rule of law, but the rule of power, as has been evident from Chinese activities in the South China Sea, Sea of Japan, armed standoffs with India, wolf warrior diplomacy, predatory economic activities, military buildup, and gross human rights violations. The raison d'etre of Quad is a common desire, need, and commitment of Quad nations and Indo-Pacific nations to ensure freedom of navigation and overflights and to maintain a rule-based, free, open, and coercion-free Indo-Pacific region. Thus, maritime security in its broadest sense was and should be the primary objective of the Quad, as there is a clear, immediate, and pressing need. A real and sustained and substantive attempt is being made to alter the status quo and cast aside unclosed norms by China. Let us not kid ourselves otherwise. But the big question is, can Quad slow or stop China in its tracks? The jury is still out. A lot will hinge, notwithstanding the rhetoric on the agenda and the effectiveness of Quad. Presently, China hardly finds any direct mention in Quad documents, though the wording does not leave much in doubt. China's long shadow looms large during discussion. Yet the experts are divided on whether to continue the wink and nod approach towards the security challenges in the Indo-Pacific region or call out China upfront. Notwithstanding loud denunciations, which is very typical of China, what Beijing sees is basically words, words, and more words. Chinese trade with most countries continue to grow. Its aggression continues to go literally unchallenged. True, there is some effort to reduce dependence on China for sensitive and strategic products, and also make it difficult for it to access cutting-edge technology. Yet, it is debatable if it has caused any real pain to China. Some tough decisions, I believe, will have to be taken by the free world for Beijing to realize that it cannot be business as usual. That said, Quad's agenda continues to evolve. Is this the right approach? I think yes. Has it met the expectation of member nations? Are they on the same page? Is the grouping representative enough, or should it be expanded? Why should other countries, especially in the Indo-Pacific region, be interested in the grouping? Some observers opine that there is a bit of ambiguity now in the direction in which Quad is moving. On the one hand, there is AUKUS, which enhances the military muscle and reach of Australia, one of the key Quad members and a strong partner of India. On the other hand, emphasis on cooperation in non-security and non-military areas is growing. The focus is expanding to economic, health, environment matters, which are important, which are critical, such as climate change, COVID vaccine, infrastructure development, clean energy, capacity building, critical and emerging technologies, and democracy. Undoubtedly, issues like cybersecurity, terrorism, HADR are also on the radar, but the emphasis on the so-called positive, practical agenda to deliver tangible results to the region. I'm happy that the Quad foreign ministers signed the guidelines for operationalizing the Quad HADR partnership, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief partnership, in New York in September last year, which will help in speeding up efforts that are being put in. Also, given the complex geopolitical environment, as well as Quad's own expanding and ambitious agenda, it may be desirable to consolidate the process by institutionalizing and even expanding it. Presently, Quad is an informal process. A secretariat will help in keeping a tab on Quad commitments and initiatives. Several nations have evinced interest in joining the grouping. We need not be in a hurry to admit any and every nation, but some broad criteria could be developed to enable like-minded countries to be invited into the fold to make Quad more broad-based and effective. Also, issue-based cooperation with a country or a group of countries in the Quad Plus format would be given serious consideration and urgent consideration. I would submit that a combination of US and Japanese technology, as well as the combined resources, material and human, reach, experience, goodwill of all the four countries can go a long way in helping the global South in addressing challenges and meeting its developmental aspirations. It is encouraging that Quad nations, along with South Korea, Indonesia, and Singapore, also a few other Indo-Pacific nations, in all 13 Indo-Pacific nations, have underlined that their economic and security interests are intertwined and have launched a process to establish Indo-Pacific Economic Framework of Prosperity. This approach makes Quad more attractive and acceptable to Indo-Pacific nations, all of which are conscious of Beijing's sensitivities and do not want to jeopardize substantive economic and political ties with China. That applies to Quad nations also, which similarly have significant economic and other interests in China. The stated policy of the US, for example, is to confront, compete, and cooperate with China. The same holds true for India, which has tried hard to qualitatively deepen ties with the West without ruffling too many Chinese feathers. In the initial years, even the word Quad was not a part of the official lexicon of India and other Quad countries. However, Chinese behaviors forced India's hand, making her less reticent. Ladies and gentlemen, in some ways, India's case is sui generis, being the only country with a 3,500 kilometer long volatile land boundary with China, which is known as the line of actual control, which is not even delineated, leave alone demarcated. You know that since May 2000, we have been dealing with an armed standoff in eastern Ladakh at a high altitude terrain of over 10,000 feet, which is treacherous and frigid. Today, the entire border of 3,500 long kilometers is live. In the event of a broader conflict, India would basically have to fend for it herself. We don't expect any boots on the ground from Quad nation, though Quad and other friendly countries will provide diplomatic support, intelligence support, and perhaps military hardware if required. As such, India has made and will continue to make every effort to manage the relationship in such a way that antagonism does not degenerate into permanent hostility or enmity, even though it is evident that cordial, leave alone friendly relations with China, which has consistently ignored and undermined India's core interests, are highly unlikely. I would say categorically that in parallel, there is widespread appreciation in India that her future lies with the democratic West, and there is no looking back. To sum up, let me say that Quad is not a matter of choice or discretion, but a necessity and even compulsion for the free world to sustain and maintain an equitable, democratic, and rule-based international order. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, for sharing such a thought-provoking insights on Quad and how to counter China and bring up the balance in the international rule-based order for Indo-Pacific region. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Arpit to share his remarks.
Sure. Thank you so much, Jay. And indeed, obviously, it is a lot of pressure to follow after Ambassador Prakash. I am going to try to keep my comments very brief. I'm going to divide my comments into three broad themes. Number one is going to be around the fact that the real danger of Quad, and this is something that we should not shy away from speaking, and neither has Ambassador Prakash shied away from pointing that out, is China. And what a revanchist China is doing to the world and what are its implications. And I will talk about the fact that China, the strategy that China is likely to adopt is not conventional conflict, conventional warfare, but traps. And traps is a concept that I would really want to explain. The second one is going to be around, what should be the core of Quad's concern? And I believe that the core of Quad's concern should be human security and looking at human security from various angles, because if traps are the challenge that we are looking at, then human security traps are going to be the most pervasive. So that's where we need to work on. The third aspect is going to be delving into some research that we've done on what makes a grouping effective. So I will very briefly touch on all three of those. So talking about traps. Now, traps are a very unusual concept and something that I have been working on for some time now, which is that being in a position of being trapped is different from being in a position of being stuck. What I mean by that is that if you're stuck in a position or a situation, then more effort, more willpower, and in general, a lot of action in a particular direction can take you out of a situation where you're stuck, but not when you're trapped. Imagine a situation where you're either stuck in quicksand or perhaps tied to a chair. Now, think about that situation. A lot of times, greater effort, especially if you're stuck in quicksand, greater effort would pull you further down into the quicksand. Or a lot of times, there are certain types of knots, and if you're tied to a chair and if you're making greater efforts, the knots are going to get tighter and tighter. So traps are a very unique way of looking at things. Economists for the longest of times have looked at poverty traps, for example, and poverty traps, Abhijit Banerjee has worked a lot on, and it really shows that how, economies and societies and individuals who are trying to come out of poverty because of one reason or the other can really fall back into it. And that's the reason why it's a trap. And the obvious thinking, the obvious linear progression does not work when we are dealing with traps. So what we will we could expect from China is rather than, and if you read a lot of Sun Tzu, if you read a lot of the Chinese historical and strategic literature, there is a clear preference over there to win not by direct aggression, but to win by creating similar traps. Now, if there is any evidence that points towards this phenomena, you can see what China did with Sri Lanka and with a number of other countries in terms of its financial debt traps. But financial debt traps are not the only one. What Quad countries should certainly be looking at are a whole range of other debt traps or other traps. Obviously, financial debt traps is one thing that the Quad countries should guard themselves against, and also other countries which are in important to Quad countries or in the circle of influence of Quad countries, because there could be knock-on effects. So that is obviously a very important thing. But then there are others. So one particular issue over there is biosecurity. Now, if you look at especially India, we do not have a very sophisticated and well-developed biosecurity protocol, where all of the ministries, all of the departments, and all of the states in the country can work in a coordinated manner. And the danger is so big that you can see that it does not even need a lot of capital, or it does not need a lot of resources to create an immediate biosecurity threat with the technologies such as CRISPR, etc., etc. So we already have seen in China, I don't know if some of us remember, 2018, there was this researcher who essentially went against all of the scientific research norms, and without informing the scientific community, experimented on genetically modified babies to make them HIV/AIDS protected, resistant to HIV/AIDS. Obviously, he was fined 3 million yuan and went to 5 million yuan and went to 3 years in jail. But that shows that such capabilities, and this was seemingly for a innocuous sort of a purpose from a security perspective. But with CRISPR and with some of those technologies available, you can really wreak havoc in a particular country, and the emergency response systems, by the time they kick in, it could be really, really too late. So I think that what we should be really looking out for in dealing with China is traps, and those traps could be of various forms. Now, typically what the research that I'm doing on traps is that the first thing that you see is that over-dependence on a particular resource makes any system susceptible to falling into traps. And you already see that we have looked at the over-dependence on Chinese imports and Chinese goods, and how that has hurt various economies during COVID. Now, as to how effectively and how swiftly are we able to diversify supply chains and make them more resilient so that you're not over-dependent on a particular country, would determine to a large extent as to whether we fall into the trade trap or not. Now, there could be other forms of traps as well. I talked about, over-dependence is one, and ignorance of certain aspects or unpreparedness of certain aspects is another. And that I talked about in terms of health and biosecurity and things like that. The third one is that it is also very easy to fall into narrative traps and fall into traps where a society is in a sort of a prisoner's dilemma within itself, which means that through informational warfare, as we've seen in the United States, where because of informational warfare, there has been a lot of political divide and polarization, which really makes any progressive policy difficult to hit the ground. And those are also internal traps that could be created through informational warfare. And we've already seen India taking some progressive steps on that and, banning, for example, TikTok from India. But the narrative traps and information warfares are much wider than that. And I think Quad should really, really come together to ideate and think through, bring the best of the experts to create roadmaps so as to make the Quad countries resilient to some of these internal traps as well. Now, the second thing, that was on traps. The second thing is emphasizing human security. And in emphasizing human security, I believe that one of the most important aspects over there, in addition to health, is just fundamental economic and financial security of a particular country. And the way that Quad can add most value is by ensuring that not just economic development for the large tech firms happen, but economic development for even smaller scale industries, especially from the Indian perspective, that is in one way or the other supported by Quad. Because what I fear a lot of times is that a lot of the technology transfer that the Quad is talking about, and it holds a lot of promise, it's a big piece of the success behind Quad, is going to be limited to just, your big IT industries or, pharmaceutical, etc. Super important industries indeed. But a lot of times, if you look at the Indian economy especially, they might have minimal knock-on effects on the small scale, medium scale industry or small scale industry sectors. Now, without that happening, and considering the fact that the majority of the industrial population is engaged in the small scale, medium scale sector, with Quad not delivering any sort of a promise or any sort of a benefit for that, either directly or indirectly, that is probably going to be a problem. And over there, very quickly, I would want to give the example of my hometown, Firozabad, where I happen to be today. And I was essentially just reflecting on the glass industry's history, and Firozabad is known for its glass industry. And what I feel is that, if you look at the macroeconomic history of the city, every 150 years, there has been a new trade or profession. So earlier, it was indigo. Before that, it was cotton growing. And now it is glass industry for, now about 100 years. And what you see is that there have been, at various points of time in history, where other countries have been able to transfer technology to the city, which has created a lot of good things. And there have been other scenarios where other countries' impact has done a lot of harm to this very small scale industry. But when I say small scale industry, it obviously employs over 1 million people over here. So 2-3 instances over there very quickly. One is that during the Second World War, where there was a lot of need for to keep the railways going and to keep the domestic infrastructure going, there was a lot of restriction on what you can export from the world. So that is when the glass industry got the impetus over here. And that's when a lot of, American technologists, actually even Dutch and British technologists came over to the city and helped develop the furnaces, helped develop the glass compositions, helped develop the management practices so that the local industry could go over there. So that was a real case of technology transfer that happened over here. And also later in the 1960s, again, that was a time of import substitution where the government discouraged India. It was not liberalized at that point of time. The government actively discouraged India to open its markets and let other companies come in. And even at that point of time, technology transfer did happen. Now, even nowadays, the sort of furnaces that you see in the city are all designed by Japanese technologists. So this was Japanese technology, and in many other ways, Japanese technologists contributed to this. And then the third and last example over there is 1990s, when the economy opened up. 1/3 of the manufacturing in this particular city was chandeliers, but China really destroyed the chandelier industry over here. As a result, a lot of the laborers, they became unemployed, and crime goes up, and there's a lot of political unrest, especially during the early 90s. Now, what I mean to say over here is that these sort of impacts now, today I was talking to a number of industrialists over here, and everybody was really, really concerned about the increasing energy prices on which the furnaces run because of the Russia and Ukraine conflict. Now, some of these international events and some of these international forces really, really can either help or hurt small-scale industries, small-scale towns. And when we say that they are small-scale, I really believe it's a misnomer, because these are the industries that employ large swaths of population in the country. And if we are looking at human security, what would be really, really important is to understand that, okay, we are sitting in some of these huge forums around Quad. I know some of us have been engaged in G20 deliberations as well. But to understand how some of those deliberations will deliver the goods over here for these industries is going to be the game changer. And I don't think that many groupings have been able to do that. But I think Quad, with a lot of focus on climate change or other non-traditional security aspects, really has the opportunity to stand out and deliver the goods for people at large, or at least give them the right pathways. So if we are talking about technology transfers, let us talk about technology transfers for not just the big industries, but also for the smaller ones, and similarly for the sustainability pillars as well. So those, I think, are very important aspects. Now, the third part, and finally, what makes some groupings successful? Well, I have myself looked at two broad sets of researches that we have come up with. Number one is the 3 C's, which is the 3 necessary but insufficient conditions for any grouping to be successful. The first C is contact, and there's been a lot of research that trade, contact, cultural exchange, exchange of academia and idea increases greater greater interlinkages between nations, and that is very important for any grouping to be successful. But that's a necessary but an insufficient condition. The second condition over there is common identities, common superordinate identities. And I think that Quad has a long way to go in terms of carving a common super identity where, an Indian, a Japanese, an American, and an Australian can identify and say that, okay, I belong to a Quad country. And I think that is going to be a big that would be a worthwhile project for Quad to pursue. And then finally, it is common goals. You just have to have a lot of cooperative, super optimal Nash equilibria where cooperation is just easy and beneficial and changes the payoffs for all of the countries in a way that greater and greater cooperation is desirable from all of the countries' side. And that, I think, is a very important aspect. If I were to share the screen, that's the second part of the research. There's obviously a lot more nuance than the 3 C's. And, what we did was that we compared all of these groupings, APEC, ASEAN, ECO, EU. And what we realized is that there are this whole range of theories which talk about this whole range of variables or factors which show whether a grouping was successful or not, and whether the grouping had particular factors there in place or not. So, for example, if I were to talk about ASEAN, because that is a very interesting case over here. So ASEAN, it has really no common enemy. If you look at it, it has, at the back end, the creation of ASEAN had a lot of support from the United States. So, there was some sort of a hegemonic initiative that got ASEAN into place. It is neither unipolar nor bipolar. That's why you see a 0-0 over here. It has certain common interest equilibriums, especially when we are talking about trade. It has been successfully able to develop some sort of a common ASEAN identity, and it shares certain common cultural threads. Obviously, a lot of these could be debated, each of the scores that are given over here. But ASEAN is not an institutional order like the EU, which has supranational institutions. ASEAN does not have that. Not all countries in ASEAN are democracy. So even the democratic peace theory or the democratic coalition success theory does not work very well. But most of the countries in ASEAN are internationalist in the sense that they're not protectionist. They are reasonably open, even though, one could also debate to the extent they are protectionalist or reason. But internationalism over here is that, generally does the politics, culture, and economy is open to international integrations, etc. And there's a whole, background research on that. So ASEAN is successful, but that's no formula. There is over here, if you look at all of our analysis and you look at 1024 combinatorial factors, the only thing that eventually comes up as consistent factors that probably point out towards successful groupings is common interests, common enemies. Those are the most important factors if you look at the various combinations. Now, with that, there could be a lot of implications. I'm going to leave that to the audience, but with that, I will close my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Arpit, for sharing your remarks. And those are really interesting and thought-provoking analysis and insights by you. It led me to thinking about so many, factors and parameters now the Quad is, kind of moving ahead with, when you identified and, kind of shared the 3 C's, which is contact, cultural, common identities, and common goals. It's really interesting to see. So I think we have few questions for Mr. Ambassador Vishnu Prakash and Arpit for you. So we'll start with first question which is for Ambassador Vishnu Prakash, and I would like to read out for you. So the question is, how will Quad 2.0 define itself if it is not an alliance, as a lot of experts and analysts claim? Then will it seek to broaden areas of cooperation to economics, perhaps as a response to China's Belt and Road Initiative? There seems to be an understanding from past efforts that the enemy of my enemy approach is insufficient to compel meaningful cooperation among members.
Can I respond?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's a very important question. The Belt and Road Initiative is already discredited for the reason that we all know it's a predatory policy. It has sucked countries into a debt trap, and Arpit has already mentioned what a trap can do. There are something like 29 countries which are on the verge of collapse or collapsing, and all the credit goes to China. The Quad 2.0, even if you call it Quad 2.0, is a grouping of a willing of democratic nations which have common challenges and commonalities, common aspirations. They have, as I said, the push factors and the pull factors. The challenge is that Quad has to strike the right balance. The agenda has to be broad, but not too broad. That is unsustainable because there is only the bandwidth to do things is finite. Secondly, a habit of cooperation will have to be developed, and that takes a long time. To develop a habit of cooperation, it's easier said than done. Third is to put the money where the mouth is, because to make pronouncements is easy, but then, let's face it, Quad is a grouping at the present of the world's largest economy, the third largest economy, the fifth largest economy, and Australia, which is amongst G20 countries. And there are a number of other countries, including France, which is knocking at the doors. And I, for one, believe that France, if somebody has the right credentials to join Quad today, I would believe it is France. Now, there are a number of countries which have the resources. Look at how resources are being utilized. Afghanistan war, the Iraq conflict cost $2 trillion. $2 trillion. Even 1/10 of that could have made a very big difference. Climate change is is a menace, a challenge where the humanity's future is at stake, but the people are tight-fisted. So, the difference between China and other democratic countries is China starts something and goes ahead and implements it, regardless of the consequences, regardless of what harm it is doing, but it delivers. Even if the project is dubious, devious, it delivers. The problem with the free world is that there is a gap between promise and delivery. So I would think that that gap should be narrowed, that agenda should be more focused, and we should take up initiatives which are implemented and implementable within a certain time frame and defined time frame, so that we can build on the success, and success begets success. Once you see Quad delivering, I guess there'll be more who will be countries which will see the attractiveness of Quad.
Thank you, Ambassador. Those are really interesting points to note down and work upon with the coming with the researchers and experts. How Quad can bring this balance of different frameworks and can do much better for the Indo-Pacific region. Now, I would like Patrick to go for the next question.
So our next question is directed towards Mr. Arpit Chaturvedi. Just for you, I think this is quite prudent, actually, considering to the end of your remarks there, you touched on common interests and common enemies. This question has to do with, I suppose, in some ways, if those two things were to be in conflict with one another, how that would impact on the potential for the Quad being a successful grouping. Looking at the result of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, there was international outrage, and many countries participated in the call to embargo Russia and place sanctions on them. India had some complications with that matter, considering what would be their own interests. They had a necessity and a need for a lot of Russian goods. Looking at the Quad and the way that it's structured today, although many of the members definitely perceive China as a common enemy, the interests of each nation and their dependency on China as far as an economic asset goes, does that not have the potential to counteract that common enemy factor and perhaps actually pull the Quad apart more than it would bring them together?
Thank you. And that's a very important question, Patrick. My response to that would be as follows, that number one, I think India's interests vis-a-vis Russia and India's interests vis-a-vis China are absolutely different, types of interests in just their quality and structure. When you look at Quad, what you see is that there are at least certain common interests against China in terms of securing certain regions, and also a lot of times similar sets of problems of import dependence. And the common interest over there becomes the idea of, or the need of, reducing the overdependence on China. And I think there is a lot of agreement. I mean, India, frankly, never had this sort of a commitment with, against Russia, that we wanted to reduce our import dependence on Russia. That has never been, a political mandate or a political collective will over here. But that certainly is the case with China, and that certainly is something that exists between India, Australia, and Japan, and to a great extent the United States as well. So I think there are clear alignment of interests over there. Now, as to how deftly will we be able to, see how we are able to service those interests. So just the presence of interests are, a starting point. But as Ambassador Prakash said, that success begets success. And if you look at, let's say, European Union, the spillover effects came because of the coal and steel union initially, which eventually spilled over from one aspect to another, and you led to the European Union. So what I would look over here is that, okay, if supply chain dependence on China is a common interest, how quickly can we see that, okay, can we move a lot of our supply chains outside of China? Perhaps, India could help in hosting some of those movements of supply chains. And that is not just something that depends on, the other Quad countries, but also on India as to whether it is able to very quickly and swiftly create the right sort of internal policy environment and incentives for those industries to move over here. So it is a game that needs to be played on both the sides. So the interest is there. How quickly we are able to, capitalize on that interest and service it so that there are spillover effects, that would be the major question over there for me. So yeah, I hope that it answers your question. I have a lot to say on Russia, but in the interest of time, I would not do that.
I think we might take one more little question, and where we would like like insights of both yours, because it touches upon the ASEAN, and I know you have shared your analysis on ASEAN. So the question is, what are the solutions to ASEAN's over-reliance of cheaper and easily accessible Chinese technologies? So when they may work in the interest of some Southeast Asian nations to gain the cutting-edge assets at the affordable prices, this will be the this is like a vital and critical questions when it comes to the emerging technology working groups to tackle within the Quad or outside the Quad, or to bring the balance in the Indo-Pacific region. Mr. Ambassador, would you like to go ahead with this?
Sure. So I think the question needs to be broadened, and it is not just ASEAN specific, it is a world specific. Today, tell me which country calls China an enemy? No country calls China an enemy. It is behaving in an inimical fashion. It is showing aggression. And yet every country, including India, is engaging with China. Every country. US trade with China is the largest. The world is kind of hooked on to, is addicted to cheap goods and technology from China. It's an addiction which needs to be shaken off, but nobody wants to bell the cat. Now, therefore, what I said is that today what is coming from the world and sitting in Beijing, what they hear is words, talk, no action. What is the pain that has been caused to China? Why should China behave? Now, China is sitting on the India's border. China has torn up all agreements with India. Chinese soldiers attacked and ambushed Indian soldiers, killing 20 of them. We kind of gave it back as good as we got. That's a different matter. China has been ignoring India's interests, and yet our trade is increasing, though we are trying our best to contain the trade. So why just ASEAN? And therefore I said in my remarks that some tough decisions will have to be taken, which will not be free, which will not be easy. If you think that you can bring China on track without any cost, that will not happen. There is a $3 trillion trade or $6 trillion trade that China has, of which $3 trillion is with the Western world. Can 10% of that be cut, which is 300 billion? Who should start bell the cat? Who should take the initiative? All these decisions have to be taken by people who have the authority and the ability to take decisions. Now, Patrick asked about India's outlook towards Russia. India's stand has been very clear, very principled and independent. Let us call a spade a spade. oil imports. Fingers are pointed at India for importing oil from Russia. Let us pause and see what is happening. Only oil which is coming on ships, the price cap is sort of imposed on that, not oil that is going through pipelines. There is a Nord Stream pipeline which pumps oil into Europe. There is a pipeline between Russia and China which pumps oil into China. That's not an issue. Why? Are those dollars earmarked to be non-aggressive? Oil, Europe's consumption is many, many times more than India's consumption. But they say Europe needs oil. India does not need oil. India's per capita income is $2,000. $2,000. Europe's per capita income is $50,000. So our difficulty is that there's a narrative which is constructed to suit the interest of certain countries. And that is something that we will not accept. If there's a level playing field is what we seek, and the level playing field is what we will work on. I'm not complaining, but our external affairs minister said something which is very clear and very telling. He said, Europe believes, and this is not just Europe, it's the West, I would say. Europe believes that Europe's problems are world's problems. But the world's problems are not Europe's problems. And let me illustrate that. War on terror. 20 years, there was this war on terror. Are there different kinds of terrorists? Is the blood different of the people whose blood is shed? Is there different color of blood? Is the pain different? Well, in some quarters, it is the case. What was the war on terror about? Against Al-Qaeda, against ISIS, against Taliban, right? For the last 40 years, India has been targeted by Pakistani terrorists. 40 years. Hundreds of people killed. But sorry, war on terror was not directed at Pakistani-based terrorists because Pakistan was supposed to be an ally. I can give any number of examples. The fact remains that if you have the power, if you are a major power, you will construct a narrative that suits your interest, which any country will do. And if it does not work for you, you are against law, you are against democracy, you are against norms. Who sets the norms? Who decides? Who is the custodian of virtues? As they say, those who live in glass houses should not throw stones at the others. I leave it here.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. Really, those were really thought-provoking examples and insights which I really feel the world should know. Mr. Arpit, would you like to go ahead with your remarks on this question?
Well, not really. I think I am 100% in agreement with Ambassador Prakash, and I would want to say exactly the same things, but I could not phrase them better. So I think there you have your answer.
Arpit, I have one question for you. Just one clarification.
Please, sir.
In your presentation, the 3C presentations, you said ASEAN as one. The categorization or the weightage given to ASEAN is one, which is that ASEAN, if you pull out the table.
Yes, sure. Just give me a second. Here it is.
Yeah. So see the category success, it is shown as success, right?
Yes.
But if you look at your table, there are 5 zeros and 5 ones.
Mm-hmm.
So how does it become a success? I mean, is that something that I wonder?
No, so it's just about the way that success is defined over here is a number of different things. So before I show you that, these are the causal factors. These are the various theories that have come up with certain variables that show that, okay, some people say that, some theorists, they say that you have to have a hegemon to be a successful grouping. Some theorists say that you have to be unipolar to be successful. Some theorists say you have to be bipolar. Some theorists say that, no, it's just about common interest. Others say that, no, it's also about common identities. So these are the various factors or various claims that various theorists have made on...
But the weightage will be different. Weightage of each factor will be different, is it?
Yes, so weightage for each factor, usually if we are working with fuzzy sets, it could be different. But right now, what we have done is that we have either kept it 0 or 1. Hegemon present is 1, hegemon absent is 0. Whether that system is unipolar, then it's 1. So it's qualitative comparisons, almost like keeping one set over the other and seeing whether this particular country falls into this set or not. If it does, it's 1.
Got it.
If
Got
it does
it.
not,
Thank
then
you.
0. Yeah.
Many thanks. Many thanks.
All right. So, so obviously, whether a particular grouping is successful or not, that is, that is obviously a debatable question. With the parameters that we have used, at least, ASEAN we have categorized as a success.
Point very well taken. I misread it. I thought that there were 5 zeros, but there are 4. So there are five positive ticks and 4 negative ticks. So that
and
makes
these
it 1.
ticks don't even weigh against each other. There could be, if we have a case where there is just 1, and then that grouping is a success. And let's say if we see 5 cases where just the presence of, let's say, common interest is there, everything else is 0, and the outcome is a success, then we know that it is common interest that is leading to most of the successes.
Got it. Got it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Back to you, Patrick and Jay.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Arpit. And Patrick, would you like to take us ahead?
Yeah, thank you, Jay. So I'd like to also extend a thank you on behalf of YPFP Tokyo and GPOD staff to our speakers, Ambassador Prakash and Arpit Chaturvedi. Thank you very much for your very insightful words to both of you. Without people like you, we wouldn't be able to host events like this at all. So it's much appreciated to hear from both of you. From Mr. Chaturvedi, your words towards the end, the close of your remarks about identity and the possibility of Quad working towards these kind of goals was very interesting to hear about, and something that I care about myself as well. So fascinating to hear that it's something that's going on up in these upper echelons as well. And Ambassador Prakash as well, to hear your thoughts on the future of the Quad. It's the question about institutionalization or a more flexible, open narrative, and the way that looks forward going into the future, as well as your very human way of interacting with these international affairs issues. It's very interesting to get a grip of, and a pleasure to be a witness to. As we bring tonight's events to a close, I'd like to invite all of you to remain in touch with us and consider joining us at YPFP Tokyo as a member. To find out more, please refer to the links in the chat that we'll be posting, and you can find out all about our upcoming events that we have for all of you that are interested in Indo-Pacific affairs, as well as Japan's domestic and international affairs as well. We're always hosting something new, so we'd love to see you come participate. We're definitely interested in hearing from those with an interest in foreign policy and international exchange, no matter where in the world you are. So don't feel as though this is a Japan exclusive organization. Feel free to reach out and note if you have an interest in any of the leadership positions or participating with us on a voluntary basis as well. And I hope you enjoyed today's event, and we look forward to seeing you again at our future YPFP events, including our upcoming focus on Northeast Asia security with the Northeast Asia Security Symposium, and future Quad events as well as things related to the G7 UN Water Conference and so much more as well. So please do feel free to look into us, and thank you for being a part of our community. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.